Portola Valley, a stunning slice of Northern California sculpted by the relentless press of huge tectonic plates along the San Andreas Fault. Nature's angst creates a beauty we crave. Tucked into the hillsides and along ravines and seasonal creeks, homes are embraced by forests, nestled among vegetation. This is referred to as a wildland-urban interface, or WUI. It's gorgeous terrain, but it also makes for a rather dangerous place to call home. The challenges facing Portola Valley are shared by countless communities throughout California and beyond.
Every year it's like playing Russian roulette. Is this going to be the year that the fire is going to start and it's going to come through?
For Rob Young, much of the last 30 years in Portola Valley have been carefree. But more recently, he's looking at life here through the smoky lens of what has happened in other Northern California communities like Paradise and Coffey Park in Santa Rosa.
I had a friend in Coffey Park that barely made it out. And Coffey Park's not even in a WUI. It's across, many lines of concrete of 101 to get to it. But the wind conditions of that day were unusual. And it blew the wind downhill across 101 into Coffey Park. Coffey Park was a high-density development, green grass, small trees, just a nice American development. Incinerated it. This was a hard reality for me to come to. My wife and I actually considered leaving because when we realized how severe the fire hazard was here, and we decided, no, we really want to stay here. And so that's when I had 10 arborists working for almost 2 weeks to really remove all the vegetative material.
Ellen Vernaza is another long-time Portola Valley resident who has gained a very different perspective since her sister and brother-in-law lost everything in the Tubbs fire, the same fire that incinerated Coffey Park.
In the past years, I never even would have thought of fire, in all honesty, because it wasn't happening in California. Over the last, 6, 7 years, it's like, oh my God, this is real. This life has changed. The climate has changed. Our safety has changed.
Cal Fire banged on our door and said, you got 5 minutes to get out of here. And at that point, the wind had gone from gusty to frightening. It was like, I don't want to get melodramatic with tornado winds, but shit was happening fast. And I got my car, got the dogs, and we literally got down the road. Where are we going? All the roads were gridlocked. The fire was out of control. You're on your own.
There was nothing left of Kathy and Scott's Santa Rosa home, nothing left of their history together, raising their family here for 30 years. No mementos, no photos, just ash. Their experience, along with thousands of others caught in wildfires in Santa Rosa, in Paradise, in communities similar to Portola Valley, has left an impression on residents here. You might say a comfortable complacency is being replaced by a growing, nagging concern about fire hazards.
People who haven't seen or witnessed a wildfire or the after effects cannot imagine what this looks like. I couldn't have imagined it until I saw the Santa Rosa fire.
These devastating fires have Portola Valley residents asking, how safe are we? Fire ecologist Ray Moritz answers that question.
The potential for serious, high-intensity, rapid-spreading fire here in Portola Valley is enormous. It's because of the topography, the vegetation, the exposure to winds. And it's particularly threatening as we move into the fire season and begin getting what's called Diablo winds. These powerful fire winds come out of the Central Valley. They're very high temperature and they're extremely rapid.
As a fire ecologist, Ray Moritz's expertise is sought throughout the state. In fact, he was the town's own expert wildfire consultant in 2008.
The homes themselves are an important contributor to potential fire within those areas because homes are filled with dozens of trees, sawed into small sticks, and then kept bone dry. Plus, you have a lot of synthetic materials in homes, such as carpeting and whatnot. So homes burn longer, they emit radiant heat longer, and they produce a lot of embers. And they burn for much longer than wildland fuels. If you've watched wildland fire move through a natural forest, a tree flares up and then dies down very quickly. Whereas a home ignites and it may be emitting huge flame lengths, tremendous amount of heat for an hour or more.
FireSafe Marin's Todd Lando echoes those concerns as he looks at Portola Valley.
I see a huge number of vulnerable features when I look at the topography itself. And in a place that frankly is frightening because it's so close to an important developed community. We know that steeper slopes will aid the spread of fire even when we don't have winds aligned with them. We know that drainages tend to channel heat into what we call a chimney, where the energy is magnified and increased and the speed of the spread of the fire increases as it travels up a drainage. Funneling heat and energy and embers in a way that concentrates it near the top of the slope. Those are extremely dangerous factors, and when we look for vulnerabilities in evacuation routes, we know that people who have been impacted and oftentimes killed or injured while evacuating fires are typically in the places that are most vulnerable to that heat energy concentration.
If the CZU fire got people talking in 2020, the recent Edgewood fire in Emerald Hills shows just how close and real the hazard truly is.
We had high temperatures. We got up to 102, 103 at the Pogus station on the other side of 280. Humidity got down to 10%. Extremely dry for June.
The Edgewood incident.
This is the first day of summer. Extremely hot for the first day of summer. What we didn't have were high winds. The winds might have gotten a gust up to 8. If we had the prevailing winds that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, where they were up in the 20 and 25 gusts, this would have been a whole different story. This would have moved a lot quicker.
Most structures are just under 200 feet.
When the aerial camera switches from video to infrared, you can see the enormous intensity of the fire's heat, how it fills the entire ravine and reaches out to surrounding homes.
We're in very dry conditions, and a lot drier than most people that live here have ever seen, and most people that are fighting fire have ever seen. These are very bad conditions.
My primary concern at this point is evacuation because, as I said, there are so many kids in schools that are so far embedded in town. There are no buses to get the kids out of schools. Everything that is built in town is built in the deep part of town.
The first thing to really worry about is we have two roads. We have Alpine Road and we have Portola Road. And what happens if a power pole comes across the road, like what happened in the Paradise Fire? What happens if trees come down? What happens if cars stall, etc.? How are we prepared? How is everybody coordinating together to make this be a successful operation? How are the schools going to be involved? How is the Sequoia's retirement community going to be involved? It's a complicated thing.
Clearly, resident safety depends on town-wide organization, clear priorities, and decisive action. CAL FIRE has identified the 10 most important steps that towns like Portola Valley should take to reduce the risk of wildfire. Towns that fulfill 6 of the 10 steps qualify for CAL FIRE grant funding to mitigate their risks. The first critical step all towns should take requires designation by ordinance of the very high fire hazard severity areas within the town's local jurisdiction. These are the highest hazard areas identified by Maritz in 2008. The second critical step requires application of CAL FIRE's minimum fire-safe development regulations to all new development projects within town. These regulations establish minimum road standards for safe evacuation and emergency response, adequate water supplies, green belts, regular fuel reduction, minimum building setbacks, and construction standards.
Not done yet.
Reviewing all of the steps on CAL FIRE's list, Maritz could not identify a single step the town has taken.
Definitely not.
Although Woodside Fire and Ray Moritz asked the town in 2008 and 2009 to designate the highest hazard areas identified by Moritz, the town refused and still refuses to do so. 13 years later, and the town's latest wildfire consultant believes Moritz's map understates the extent of risk.
I think it's good. He's, I think, likely spent more time on the ground than I have, but it's 13 years old. And I think if I was going to draw the red circles on the map, my map would have more red on it than his.
Portola Valley's town council recently implemented a new building code that requires hardening of structures. That means any new homes or apartments being built must have fire-resistant exteriors. But when you're talking about wildfires that reach dense residential neighborhoods, the thermal heating becomes so intense that houses burn from the inside out.
That doesn't mean hardening homes is a bad idea or a waste of money. We need to take further steps to harden homes even more, and the proximity of one home to another. And from outbuildings, we need to get those spaces separated out so that we don't have one structure igniting the next structure and turning into a snowball like we saw in Coffey Park.
Other leading scientists agree. Alex Maranghettis is a senior wildfire researcher at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. He spent years studying the destruction of homes and neighborhoods in California wildfires, while home hardening against embers is always recommended. Maranghettis explains that home hardening against fire is not sufficient or effective to prevent home ignition and fire spread if there is inadequate separation between structures.
If you're too close, in most cases there's no value in hardening because the hardening will not be sufficient to handle the exposure, and it's not money well spent.
In fact, CAL FIRE, the National Institute of Standards, and the insurance industry's Institute for Home Safety all agree. If structures are separated by less than 25 feet, home hardening will not significantly protect one structure from being ignited by the other.
Let's look at structure density. We have three scenarios here. Spacing of greater than 50 feet, no problems. Here, we do have a hazard, but we can partially mitigate that hazard. Here, the spacing is such that adding this directional preferential hardening will not significantly enhance the ignition resistance. And the emphasis here has to be placed on preventing all of these high-density homes from igniting.
As Maranghettis explains, in WUI neighborhoods, a single ignition within densely spaced homes can be devastating.
If we look at the partial hardening in the context of community, high-density community, one structure ignition, large losses. One ignition, the whole community gets lost in high density. In WUI conditions, with wind and a big incident. What we see here is the Majestic neighborhood, very similar to Coffey Park, very small parcels and almost complete destruction. Very similar behavior in terms of fire spread, probably what happened in Coffey Park. Let's zoom in a little bit more here. And you can see here on less than an acre, we have 8 residences with structural separation distances of 8 feet. And here you can see the destruction of all the triangles in the Majestic neighborhood.
In such densely spaced communities, the homes themselves become the fuels driving rapid fire spread.
Vegetation had almost no role in the fire in Coffey Park. The homes were the wildland fuel, so to speak. Spacing is important not only in vegetation, but also in homes, because the heat, the radiant heat, and the convective heat, the hot winds from a burning home, predisposes the next home by raising the temperature of the cladding around the house and making them more ready to burn. I've actually seen homes emitting gases from the radiant heat that suddenly, when embers entered that cloud of gases, it just blew up the whole volatile cloud. So The proximity of homes is very important.
Residents' concerns are real. The fast and furious nature of fires within a woodland-urban interface leaves precious little time to pack up your documents, your pets, your children.
It's more of like a firestorm. You're in the middle of that firestorm. It's like being in the middle of a hurricane, tornado. What are you gonna do? Run, run. That's all you can do. Where are you gonna run?
It's been 5 years since Kathy and Scott survived the Tubbs fire, but scars remain. They can't help but look at Portola Valley and warn folks that this loss is so much greater than material.
People don't realize until after they've lost their home what a shock and depressing experience it is to lose all material evidence of your life. Many people say, well, I'm insured for that. But I've seen people suffer greatly in the many fires where I've done recovery plans where it has shaken them to their core.
Hearing stories like that and seeing fires flare up even in coastal communities in the winter have some residents feeling like they have no option but to step up and be heard.
You know, before a year and a half ago, I had no interest at all in being involved in town politics or town government here. And then I realized what's happening. And it's us all together that we need to pull together to protect ourselves.
The first responsibility of local government is public safety. Citizens tend to assume their elected leaders are looking out for their best interests. However, in Portola Valley, many residents believe that the town's refusal to designate the very high fire hazard zones and implement the state minimum fire safe development regulations required threaten their very safety.
I was really surprised to find out how little the town council has done over the years to protect us from wildfire.
Currently, the Woodside Fire Protection District is mapping the town's wildfire hazards and risks. When they present their findings to the town council, residents will have another opportunity to voice their concerns about the extreme fire risks they face.
The Woodside Fire has really, they've done this in an incredibly professional manner. And I think we're going to get out of that some really great information. But I would really like for the town to embrace that and to embrace what we need to do to really help everybody's life here.
To protect lives and homes against wildfire risks, California communities can implement all of CAL FIRE's most important risk reduction steps. Immediately designate fire hazard severity zones previously identified and update as new data become available. Adopt CAL FIRE's minimum fire safe development regulations for very high fire hazard severity zones. Amend the safety element based on a comprehensive wildfire hazard and risk assessment. Develop an evacuation plan and implement a comprehensive evacuation program. The state of California and CAL FIRE have laid out the minimum safeguards for development in very high fire hazard areas. By embracing these requirements, we can better save lives and homes when wildfire strikes. The responsibility is ours.
I would tell the citizens of Portola Valley, CYA, okay? Cover your own you know what, because if you think that the politicians or the builders or anybody involved has got your back, that could get you killed.